Coming up tonight on Game All Night, Eric Summerer of the Dice Tower joins me. This Week and Each Week is brought to you by Game Toppers. Upgrade your gaming experience.
Welcome to Game All Night.
Well, hello and welcome to another Game All Night. Tonight, we are going to be joined by Mr. Eric Summerer, voice actor extraordinaire, voice actor to the stars, one or two of them anyway, I'm sure. Right, Dan? Are you excited, Dan?
I am absolutely excited.
Yeah, like we were up gaming until like 1 a.m. last night. We're ready for this. I think we're good to go.
That's a brilliant way to prepare for a recording session.
Right, we played at least 4 rounds of Merchant of Venus just to... No. I do jest. We did not. I would have, but we did not. So how we doing, Dan? We doing good? What are we drinking?
I'm doing good. Oh, as a matter of fact, we have gone local tonight with a pair of beers from Fegley's Brewworks, which is right out of Allentown.
All right.
Not far at all away. They also have a location that brews out of Bethlehem, PA. Chris and I are both within spitting distance of those towns. So I am drinking their Hop Explosion, which is a pretty traditional American IPA, coming in about 70 IBUs.
Right.
And you're drinking the Hoptimism, which is relatively similar, more of an like Amarillo forward kind of hops flavor.
Yeah, so. and I like it because it's, I'm not so much on the citrus, so the Amarillo works for me. I'm really digging it. This is the first time I've had this one. I've had the Hop Explosion many times.
Yeah, that's a flagship of theirs, and I think a Hoptimism is a recent brew or a seasonal.
Definitely good. But I think... I don't know if Eric drinks, but let's put the question to him. Hello there, Mr. Eric. Welcome on board.
Hello there, gentlemen. How's it going?
It's excellent. It's outstanding. Are you drinking anything with us tonight?
I am. I came prepared. I'm drinking. I'm not sure if this is going to destroy your sensibilities and really make you upset, but I have Krabby's Orange Spice Ginger Beer.
Hey,
I'm a big fan of the alcoholic sodas. I really like those, and when the ginger ales I think are my favorites of that style because the Mountain Dew analogs and the hard root beers taste a little funny to me, but the hard ginger ales, the ginger beers, I think are really strong, and I really like. This is actually my favorite of the bunch of the ginger.
You know what? I wonder if that's really due to the fact that our taste buds are so honed in on what cola should taste like and on what these other styles should taste like. Like, everybody can tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi, right? Like, we know. Sure. So when somebody goes and tries to make an alcoholic cola, we're like, it's like somebody made RC and dumped some shine in it. It's just not as good, right?
Right. It's weird. Or that they started with beer and then got to soda.
Yeah.
And so it tastes just fake weird.
Yeah. Whereas, ginger ale's kind of a more wide open play field. I mean, yeah, you have your Canada Dry, but it's pretty. There's a lot of different varieties to play with.
Not to mention, potentially, I don't know how this line does it, but that's you can actually brew a ginger beer. That might be an actually brewed beverage. So they came by it authentically.
I think you're right, actually.
And ginger beer is like, the favorite thing I'm buying these days for, my bourbon mules and my Kentucky mules that I'm doing. It's... and what's amazing is the variety, because you get some of the Jamaican ginger beers and they're all like spicy and peppery. And
very spicy, yeah.
Yeah, which really goes great with some of those, the sweeter bourbons. So how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing splendidly, keeping busy. I'm beginning the run up to Essen. We're heading to Germany in just a couple weeks, and so I'm trying to get my list together. We're actually recording our top 10 on the Dice Tower of our anticipated Essen games this week. And going through that, there's 1,000 releases coming out in Essen in just a week and a half or so. And it's a lot.
It's insane. I was looking on either Fun Again or the Game Surplus site to try and say like, oh, should I try and get them to mule something back? And I'm looking at the list this year and I'm like, I have no idea where to start. Like, I'm so far behind that I'm just like, I know, waiting 6 months for something to come out is probably not a bad idea right now.
No. I mean, if I can recommend, if you are totally overwhelmed in looking at the Essen list, there's a site called Tabletop Together.
Okay.
That has a wonderful tool for sifting through all this stuff. You can take all of the games that are not released in English and immediately remove them from the list. You can take all the games that are a mechanism that you really dislike, remove them from the list. You can highlight all the, say, pick up and deliver games and make those a higher priority as you finally sift through, granularly and actually look at the list. But you can take care of a bunch of them well before you get to the whole list of 1,000.
Right. I mean, it's really interesting because, then there's also the whole rub of, well, if I go and I get something muled over and then it just comes out 2 months later, it's like, well, now I just wasted, a lot of money to do that. And I
have made that mistake many times, spending a lot of time and effort and luggage space to get things that are going to be out in another month or two. And you can only play so many of these games once you get home before they are in the wild again. So you have to sort of pick and choose. I try to keep it to just a handful of releases that I know I absolutely must play immediately and will get to immediately as soon as I get home.
So do you take the extra suitcase, or you just probably get a big box and bring a box on the plane, right?
I try to not ship stuff home. That's my limiting factor that keeps me from going totally overboard, because you can at these events.
Sure.
Just totally blow your budget and bring home way too many things. So I have my one large suitcase, hard-sided suitcase, and it's mostly empty when I head over, and it has a carry-on inside it, like a duffel bag. So my trip home, all of my dirty clothes are in the duffel bag, maybe a couple of heavy games. That's my carry-on on the plane, and the rest of the suitcase is full, packed as well as I can with whatever games. And I have a luggage scale to make sure I'm not over when I head back home.
Now has there ever come that point where you're like, you know what? I really don't need this pair of pants, but I really need this Uwe Rosenberg game. Has that happened? You're like, well, either that or you pulled the Joey from Friends, and I'm wearing all my clothes, and you get on the plane.
It's closer to the latter. Yes, I have had to, as I get over, because I've often packed the suitcase and then realize I'm a good 5 pounds over.
Right.
Of course, it's also in kilograms when you're flying internationally, so I have to do the math there. And then I have to figure out, do I take this heavy game? When I bought Food Chain Magnate, I bought at Essen a few years ago. And that's a very heavy game, lots of wooden pieces. And so that one had to go in the carry-on. And so whatever heavy, I end up being really overloaded with my carry-ons on the way home, because I've got my personal bag and my carry-on duffel, and they're both full of games, the heaviest games, because I have to get those home. But I've never had to, say, throw away clothes or get rid of a game at the last minute or ship. Fortunately, I haven't had to ship anything home. My colleagues, however, have had to do that on many occasions.
Yeah. Does Tom doesn't give you an allotment on the pallet that he ships back, or you don't get Eric? You all get one box and you get to put it on the pallet. It's kind of I think it should be a fringe benefit, right?
It should be, but then that pallet goes to Florida, and I'm in Connecticut. And so then I'd have to wait till another convention to get it. Also, on several occasions, those pallets have been very slow to get to headquarters.
Yeah.
It's not always a guarantee that those come back quickly. In fact, the stuff that Tom wants to review right away goes in the suitcase and comes home in his personal possessions so that he can get to those reviews right away. And then the lower priority reviews end up on the pallet.
Right.
That he can get to later.
Oh, it's the whole international shipping thing is just when you get to the large stuff. I mean, we could throw boxes in the mail and it'll get there. That's fine. But when we start getting to the large stuff, it gets really dodgy. I mean, just listening to, I don't know if you followed Rado's saga as he's been coming back from, being in Malta to the UK and then back to Seattle area. They lost almost over half his stuff, the moving companies. And we're not talking just a shipping crate or two. No, like legit, like half the stuff they own is just like, it's in limbo. They don't know where it is. He's filing it with insurance companies. It's been months, and it's just like, oh my goodness. I just can't imagine having to deal with it. It gets tricky. Packing is not
Logistics is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they make games about it, right?
Exactly. There is one of the Essen releases is a game about packing pallets.
There you go.
It's a cooperative spatial game where you're stacking blocks on a pallet and trying to have as little empty space as possible while loading the boxes in the order that the game tells you to load them.
It reminds me
a lot
of
very much Essen the game.
Remember Pack and Stack from back in the day? I loved that game. But it was the same thing, right? You're trying to pack things and be efficient, and it's a very polarizing thing though, because some people who don't get the spatial relationships just click, they're off. Yeah, no.
Yes.
We kind of go through the same thing when we scuba dive, because I didn't know this the first time I took our gear, because like my wife and we'll take 2 suitcases. One is literally just for our dive gear, and then one is our clothes. Well, what we didn't count on was how much more it would weigh on the return trip, because it doesn't have a chance to dry out. So we were like, why? We literally packed the exact same stuff in the case. We're like, why are we like 6 pounds overweight? And we're like, oh, it's
you didn't bring it out enough. Yeah.
Shipping, packing, and all that stuff is its own whole separate set of challenges. And then the carry-on rules for international flights are different too, right? Because they're smaller than what we are accustomed to in the U.S. now. So like my carry-on wouldn't work.
That's entirely possible, which is why I'm glad I have a duffel. When I try not to have a carry-on on the plane. I'm one of those weird ones that I'm willing to pay. I'll pay the fee. I actually have a credit card that gets me the bag for free. But I would rather check a bag and have just my suitcase that I can stick under my seat, so I don't have to worry about overhead clearance at all. Because that stresses me the heck out when I'm,
you got to get on early. Got to get on
early. Do I get space next to my seat? I don't worry about it at all, because I know this is my space. I have this space under my seat, and I'm okay. It doesn't matter when I get on the plane, because the person sitting next to me is not going to take my undercarriage space.
Interesting, because I'm just the opposite. I take, like when I go away for work, I just take my roller and that's it. And because I don't want to have to deal with baggage claim. I don't want to have to deal with any of that. So I'm like, this way I just walk right out of the airport when I'm done. So it's a little different.
That's an advantage, that's for sure. Yeah.
But you're right, because then you don't stress out. Like I literally have a list of airlines and what order they board. Because, like, I know, like, if I'm in this zone, I have no problem. I'll get a space. But if I'm in this zone, I'm not going to get one. So.
Right. Yeah, and then you have to check it. And sometimes that ends up being a check that you have to go to baggage claim. It's all a big.
Exactly. It's not fun. But we're not really here to talk about travel. I mean, we're here to kind of talk about your life. I mean, obviously, you're getting ready for Essen. That's kind of big. That's huge. That's fun. So what else goes on in your daily life when you're not prepping for Essen? What's a day look like?
A day involves me getting the kids up and out the door. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I have to get them on the bus. But once they get on the bus, I can begin my day. I work from home, and I record audiobooks.
Right.
So I am prepping any pickups or quick sessions I need to do in the morning, looking at maybe the next book I'm doing, highlighting characters, taking notes, looking up things I need to look up for this particular session, basically getting ready. I have an assistant that comes to the house, and she runs the board. She sits actually in this seat where I'm sitting now, and
nice.
My booth is over here. And I get in the booth, and she runs the recording, makes sure I'm reading everything correctly. And we do a full, I guess it's maybe 5-6 hours of recording. And then it's time to pick up the kids from the bus. And then it's off to soccer and ninja class and all that stuff.
I find that what's really cool is that, I've been in watching board game media since probably 2012. It's really fun watching your kids grow up, Yes. And like what you're able to start playing, and you can kind of see, I saw just the other day you were getting out some HeroScape, and you were kind of having some fun with them playing that.
Yes, we had the day off yesterday, and they'd been playing with HeroScape as a toy. for some time. I've just sort of acquired different, and I've got maybe a good sized couple Tupperwares of stuff for Heroes. But never really played a ton of it. I have sort of been saving it for the kids. And they asked, with their day off yesterday for Indigenous Peoples Day, they asked for a run of Heroescape, and they wanted me to teach them the rules. So they set up a map. They spent all day the previous day setting up the map and divvying up the teams. And so I didn't know what I was going to get into. But we played about 85% of the actual rules of Heroescape with the flag markers, the initiatives, playing by the special powers for the different characters. But the kids insisted on adding rules of like having NPCs that you can capture and get on your team, and then those respawn, which just made the game. We started after lunch, and we had to leave the house at like 3:45, and we were still not quite done with their scenario. So they learned a little bit about having a reasonable scenario when you set up a game like this. You don't want to make the map, as cool as it is to make the map huge and have all these crazy rules, you really don't want to do that to have a reasonable play experience.
Yeah, and I think that it's tough, and that's kind of like the Monopoly house rule is probably the easiest version of that, right? Because it allows everybody to be in it and still having that same chance and same level of fun, instead of, you want to build into the climax and then kind of trail off and have a quick end, right?
There's a reason why the rules are what the rules are.
Exactly. Somebody was a little smarter than me and figured something out, which frankly isn't hard to do. I mean, that's definitely not hard to be smarter than this guy. So you definitely have a full day. I mean, because that's a lot. I didn't even know you had an assistant. That's so she's reading right along with you the whole time, and
she is
just like
and hitting the button so that I can focus on doing my performance on the characters. And when I get really into the emotion of a scene and I'm doing like a big argument between two characters, I will often make mistakes in that because I'm more concerned about the emotion and the heights of the scene than I am about getting every and every little word correct. And so she's there to say, oh, no, hang on, stop. It's a lovely scene, but you said that wrong. So let's go back.
Definitely is interesting in how the audiobooks come together. I consume a ton of them because I have an hour commute, so I'm constantly listening. When I drive and take trips, I listen to more. Most recently, I listened to, yours was the Scott King when you did the Ameriguns for him. It was interesting because it was fun, and then it was even more fun to do the reading a 5-hour novel right after that. Or writing the 5-hour novel, because you narrated that too. Yeah. And so you got to talk about the book that he was writing, and then you got to actually listen to the book that he wrote in 5 days, right?
It's amazing, the whole process that it went into. And the 5-day novel has the distinction of being the most meta of any audiobook I have done, because there's a journal aspect to this as you go through his adventure of writing this novel. And at one point on day 3 or something, he has a conversation with his audiobook narrator. That's me. And then later on, he talks about wanting to have me, Eric Summerer, read a phrase that is part of the audiobook. It's this weird, like, multi-layered section where I am, in his voice, I'm talking about making me say something that references Tom Vassell for some reason. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was hysterical. And it was, especially if you know the backstory, I think it adds a lot more color to it. But it kind of struck me as that must have been like that moment that, like, I think Will Wheaton had when he was reading Ready Player One. And he saw himself as running for president of the internet. I'm like, it had to have been that kind of meta for you, which I thought was pretty cool. Well, awesome. I definitely want to get more into the audiobook. So we're going to be right back after this quick word. Pontifications with Patrick Hillier.
100 years ago, everyone owned a horse, and only the rich had cars. And today, everyone has a car, and only the rich have horses. Oh, how the stables have turned.
Well, welcome back there, Game All-Nighters. I'm still here with Mr. Summerer of Dice Tower fame as well as audiobook fame. And I think your career on Dice Tower is pretty well documented at this point. I think you've covered that multiple times, multiple shows, right? You've definitely...
I think so.
Yeah, so, I mean, and honestly, let's face it, if you don't listen to Dice Tower 8, you should, because it's probably, you know, one of the ultimate board gaming podcasts. It covers most of the topics that anybody could ever want. So go check that out and then come back, and then we'll be here for the rest of the interview, I think, right?
Sure. Just pause this and go listen to the entire 576 episodes of Dice Tower.
576.
Yes, I just edited Dice Tower episode 576.
Wow. And you've been on, I mean, now granted, you haven't been since the beginning. There have been 2 other hosts, and now you share duties. So it's not been continuous, but, I mean, you've still been on since at least before 100, correct?
I was involved in the show since before 100 as sort of a production manager. I was doing comedy bits and that sort of thing. I became co-host in episode 154.
There you go.
Which was in 2009. So it's almost been 10 years that I've been
400 odd episodes in 10 years, and now it's like they kind of, I think you and Tom got tired of being on and kind of said, you know what, let's get some help in here. And now you have Suzanne, you and Mandy doing the rotation. I love it. What I like is that you guys mix it up, and that, you know.
Yeah, well, I think expanding is certainly one of the goals. I think Tom and I have a great rapport, but people are sick of hearing us, I think, sometimes. And we didn't want to be the only voices on the show. The Dice Tower video channel has been multiple voices for many years now.
True.
And to have the audio podcast be just Tom and me for so long was getting, I don't want to say stale, but a little insular. And so having the new perspectives of Mandy and Suzanne, who had already been doing work with the Dice Tower, they were already part of the family, and to add them in it's invigorating, because I listen to their episodes and I get to hear perspectives I didn't know anything about. I get to hear about games I didn't know anything about, and suddenly I have thought of ways to do our job on episodes I'm on differently, and then when we get to mix it up even more, when, say, I get to do an episode with Suzanne or with Mandy, and Tom does one with Suzanne or Mandy, or we all get to do one together, as we will be doing for the Essen show coming up, then the energy just takes a huge leap forward. I love having the new blood in the team, in the mix. It's great.
Oh, no, it absolutely is, and the show's definitely gotten the better for it. I mean, it's, if nothing else, like you say, it has that wider appeal. It has the more voices. It has, I mean, that many more games to talk about, because, you know, now you have 4 people talking about different things, so it brings 4 different views, styles, and I don't know if there's one game that the 4 of you would play together often. That's the thing. Like, I can see you playing some games, but all your play styles are so different.
Yeah, it's rare that we all get to sit down at one table.
Yeah, without a microphone being in the middle of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or a steak. I mean, you could be out having dinner. I mean, that's the other time. Fair enough. So when you're not doing all things Dice Tower, running around to conventions constantly, and you're getting snowed in up in Connecticut up there because it's a little chilly. It's not quite the Great White North, but it's northish, and it's sometimes
it can act like it sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially last year, it's a little rough. So you do voiceover work for basically a lot of audiobooks. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So how, like, it doesn't feel like you set out in high school to say, you know what, I want to narrate audiobooks. You know, I don't think that that's a path. And you're in Connecticut, so I'm assuming that there's a prestigious college of communications involved in your life, and I'm making a leap here. So,
no, you're not wrong. I am a Syracuse University grad. I was at the New School of Public Communications in television, radio, film.
There you go.
I wanted to be a Muppeteer. I
Okay.
was headed that way. I did a talk show style college television show that looked very similar to yours, except instead of a bartender, we had a Muppet band leader.
I would totally turn Dan into a Muppet if I could.
Do not. I think we need to cut this discussion. I think
Trust me.
If I tune in next
If
week,
I could- if I
my
could
whole
made-
segment has been replaced.
If I could make Brack happen, my beer budget would be cut in half.
It's true. Yes. So I interned with Henson. I actually worked with Sesame Workshop for a little bit. I was an intern on Cinder Elmo one
Okay.
summer in New York City. And so I was sort of on the path to send audition tapes to Henson and really, go that route to be a performer, a Muppeteer. It didn't work out.
Okay.
And so I ended up going into radio in Connecticut, in Hartford. And I was on a classical music station for like 3.5 years called Beethoven.com.
Okay.
It was the world's classical music station. And the idea being classical music without the attitude is what we called it. So we played classical music as if it was the hits, as if it was a top 40 station. And had, sort of an irreverent attitude to still great music. We played great music and great composers and performers. But we didn't treat it with such kid gloves. It was a lot of fun to have an international audience for this radio show in the basement of a radio station in Hartford. But I started doing voiceover work with that radio station.
Right.
And decided I liked doing that more than I liked the daily grind. As much as I did enjoy it, I was the morning guy for several years.
Oh, wow.
As much as I liked it, I liked the creativity, the creative outlet of doing voiceover work more than I liked the daily grind of the radio show. So I left in 2004 to do this full time and started my first audiobook in 2005. So I
that's
sort of
pretty
fell
fast.
into that pretty quickly.
How does finding work in the audiobook world, happen? Because, I mean, obviously Scott King was he's his own house, so he just reaches out and he hires you to do his job, and that's pretty straightforward. But, when you start to deal with companies like Audible and things like that, like they actually will turn around and hire people to read the books to get them into their own system. If I'm not wrong here, I don't think so. So how do you go about like trying to find and secure books to read and then kind of keep them, I guess?
Right. I mean, so I originally started working for Audible. They were my first client, and it happened to be I had a demo online. There's various online casting services, and so I had an audiobook demo out there. And they asked, would you be interested? Can you give us some samples? They sent me a few random scripts and just had me read them. And one of those auditions ended up being one of the books I recorded first. Ken Kesey's Sometimes a Great Notion was one of those auditions, and it was my first audiobook right off the gate.
Interesting.
And
so came out swinging.
Yes, I mean, it was like a 600-page book to kick things off.
Wow.
Which is not a small thing to do. And so I did well enough that I sort of entered their roster. And when projects came up that they thought I'd be good for, they asked if I would be available, and we scheduled. And it sort of got the ball rolling. The more reviews I got, the more good feedback I got, the more I started getting more jobs. And then other publishers start seeing my name on lists on Audible or in reviews in AudioFile magazine. And I started marketing on AudioFile that I have a profile as a narrator. And then other publishers started to contact me and say, hey, you want to do something for us too? And so I have maybe 3 or 4 publishers now that I generally keep working with. And they email me, say, are you interested? Does this fit in your schedule? And I have a calendar. In fact, my Scott King board gaming calendar is full of Post-it note flags with all of my books. And so it's just, I'm booked out until, I think I'm booking in November now.
Pardon the pun, but that's fine.
Yeah. Yes. I've actually booked a few into next year already. I have several titles that are already scheduled for, say, February of next year. And it's, yeah, I like working that way because I know what's coming. Of course, things happen and I have, I get sick or I have to reshuffle things. But with my travel schedule, it really helps to know what I'm doing over the next several months.
Now, like most audiobooks we're going to get probably, I'd say 8 in the 8-10 hour range, right? I mean, it's a typical 400, 500 page book. It tends to fall about that length. So how long does it actually take to put one of these together? Because it's not like you just go, that's not one day's work. That's, I can't believe that, hey, 8 hours. So I just go read for 8 hours. I'm good to go. It doesn't happen like that.
No. I mean, 8 hours, I don't think I could read for 8 hours straight. My mind goes before my voice does.
Right.
I start to make many more mistakes. I start to mix up things, sort of lose my place more often. It becomes more of a slog to get through.
Right.
I get about 2.5 hours done of final audio a day. That takes about 4 to 5 hours in the booth.
Wow.
With all the mistakes and the recues and the chapter breaks and saving and all that stuff. So I get about 2.5 hours done a day, which means that if I have a 10-hour audiobook, and I sort of get this estimate, I know what the word count is, and the publisher will say, we think it's going to be about 10 hours long. I know I need to schedule 4 days of recording to do that book.
There are some people who read a book, and you can tell when either there's an edit, or you can tell when, like, you can see if they changed a name because maybe they pronounced it wrong a lot, and they have to try to re-record sections or segments, and you can feel that, and it's like seeing a typo in print. Your brain picks up on it. How do you go about trying to avoid that and keep the continuity and the flow? Because in Ameriguns, I couldn't really tell when your recording days stopped and started as I can with a lot of other people.
That's good. I try and stay as consistent as possible. That involves keeping my voice healthy, going through the same routine every day before I start recording. What you're talking about with the mistakes that get fixed. So if I miss something, my engineer is trying to catch any mistakes I do during the course of recording, and we try and fix them then. But if something slips through the cracks, or there's a technical issue, there's noise in the background. I just recently had to do about half of a chapter over again because you could hear the neighbor's lawnmower that I didn't realize. I could hear it in the distance, but I didn't think it bled into the recording, and it did, so we had to redo that whole section. So when that happens, I get a clip of what the original version sounded like.
Right. And
we put it into a multi-track session in the computer, and I get to hear what the original version was. And I hear myself make the mistake, the mispronunciation, the noise, the glitch, whatever. And then I immediately record it again. So I give the same inflection, the same volume, the same intensity, the same character voice, or as close as I can get it, with the correct read, or without the noise, without the glitch, without the technical issues. And hopefully that gets matched back into the recording as smoothly as possible so that you don't notice that hiccup when something has been re-recorded. Voices change, though, over time. If it's been 3 weeks since I recorded something, and maybe I had a little bit of a head cold during the recording of the book, and then now I'm feeling better, I've actually had to simulate a head cold a little bit. I can't necessarily go the other way. Like, if I was healthy during the main recording and I have a head cold and have to get the pickups done, I can't do that. But I had one of the Dungeons and Dragons novels that I did. I stopped in the middle of a chapter just because we ran out of time, and had to stop at that point in the day. And then I got sick over the weekend. Ooh. And tried to go back and jump back in, and I did not sound the same as I did in the previous section.
As you were getting sick and coming out, yeah.
And so we had to call off the day of recording, come back the next day. I still didn't sound right. Send her home, call off the day of recording. We did it for maybe 3 or 4 days. I think it took a full week before I knew I was good enough to jump back in and record.
Wow.
So that I try to avoid as much as possible, because if I'm not talking, I'm not making any money.
No, it absolutely makes sense. I mean, it's nice to have a day off, but it sucks to need to pay for those day off, right?
It is.
It helped with gameplays, I'm sure, but that only goes so far.
Yep. Well, just a few months ago in May, Connecticut got hit with a tornado, and so I lost power. And so I couldn't record anything. I sort of need electricity to run my studio. And so I did get to play a bunch of games with the kids who had no school, because their school had no power either.
Right.
And actually, it was sort of the icing or the silver lining on the tornado. so we got to play some stuff, but I still there was that back of my mind thing, like I am losing money, I'm behind schedule, I have this full calendar I need to get through. So it's nerve-wracking, being a business owner as well as a performer.
Right, and that's the key thing, because you are managing your own. You're doing everything. You're your own manager, your own scheduler. You're doing all the jobs. But the other thing I find interesting is that sometimes when I'm looking for a new book or a new series, what I'll actually do is I actually start searching the narrator now, because Scott Brick, he does all the favorite novels I like, so chances are he's going to record the same things I like. So have you found any kind of continuity in the things you're doing that kind of, do you make conscious decisions based on, I read these things well, I should stick to these? Is there any of that in your decision process?
I mean, that's not as much my call as it is the publisher's call.
Okay.
If I have a particularly successful book, when I first started, I did a lot of classic sci-fi.
Right.
I did some Kurt Vonnegut. I did some Robert Heinlein. I did Childhood's End, and so that was sort of my pigeonhole, that I was doing these classic sci-fi books. I also have a little bit of a reputation in romance, which is something that people like to make fun of a lot. I also do a lot of fantasy and more modern, like military sci-fi these days.
Right.
And so I have a little bit of a reputation in that community or in that genre. I recently did a book called Video Game Plotline Tester, which is part of a genre called lit RPG.
Okay.
Ready Player One is a lit RPG book. It's about a video game world and the characters existing in that video game world.
Okay.
And so I did one of those, and a series that is still ongoing, and I'm enjoying that one. But another publisher enjoyed that book, said, we have a lit RPG series that we'd like you to do, and we want you to now take on this. This is actually a book I'm working on now. And reviews of that new book said, I heard Eric on this other book and enjoyed him there, so I went looking for other lit RPG books with him as narrator. So absolutely, the stuff you're doing, Chris, is something that other listeners do, and hopefully, if I've done a good job with a particular style of book, there are others that also fit that mold. Like if you liked my Dungeons and Dragons books, there are Pathfinder tales as well, and other non-branded fantasies that you can listen to.
Yeah, and it's funny because we kind of, as a listener, we kind of latch onto those things, and you don't necessarily realize it, but you kind of get used to how somebody reads, and then you maybe go back in time and you listen to an early book, and you're like, oh wait, this is a different reader. All these voices are wrong. This person doesn't talk like that. You start to get this bleed over because you get really comfortable with the person reading. So
yes,
what has been if you were to pick one book that you would love to do and probably would challenge you or be a lot of fun to do, what do you think would be the either book or IP?
Oh boy. I mean, there are ones that I when I first read Ready Player One, I really wanted to tackle that book, and then I found out Will Wheaton did it, and I shook my fist at it.
A lot of people do, and it's fair.
Yes, I would enjoy tackling the Harry Potter series, just from a character standpoint. Although doing that much British, I think, would give me trouble. I have some passable British accents, but I think if you give me an entire cast of characters that are all from the UK, I would have a little bit of trouble differentiating them.
Sure.
Whereas if you give me a bunch of Americans, I have a bigger palette to work with. I'm more familiar with those accents and voices. It would be a challenge for sure, and it would be a lot of fun. And I did read several of those books to my kids with voices and everything, not professionally.
Interesting, because I say that because I had a feeling that would be. Because it's got to be challenging, right? Like Jim Dale for Deathly Hallows, went in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most character voices in one reading. I forget exactly what it was, but it was ridiculous.
That's entirely possible. I actually worked with the engineer who did the Harry Potter books.
Oh wow!
And one of my Audible jobs, I was in. I was talking with my engineer, and J.K. Rowling's name came up in the text. I was
Sure.
reading a nonfiction book, and she said, I think I said Rowling. I mispronounced it. She's like, no, it's Rowling. I was like, you're sure? She's like, I'm sure. And I got the story of her, signing the NDA because they recorded the audiobook before the release of the print edition. And so, they could do a simultaneous release. So she knew what happened in those final books and couldn't tell anyone.
Wow. I mean, that's a tough NDA to have. I mean, that was I don't know if, it wasn't that long ago, but it was still a while ago, right? I mean, it's been a while since, because they used to come out, we would go to, like, Borders was still open and things like that. We do the midnight releases and all those things. Yep. And it was, but I remember, like, towards the end, the audiobooks came out at the exact same time.
Yes.
And so here's the real question, though, and I think I have the answer, but we need clarification here. Is it Jim Dale or is it Stephen Fry who reads the Ultimate?
I have not done a side-by-side comparison, so I think I have to go with Jim Dale since that's the one I've heard more.
Yeah.
But I do know that there are fans of one or the other that really like one more. I have not done the comparison.
It's funny. I've listened to both, and I'm kind of in the same boat, but I think it's partially because Jim Dale's were the first ones I listened to, and
Right.
It's probably the one series I've experienced more times than any other, because that's my Lord of the Rings. Like, I never really got into. I was forced to read it when I was a kid, so it didn't really stick. So it's just kind of, which is sad. I kind of feel like I lost some of my nerdom, but at the same time, but the Harry Potter for some reason clicked. It just did.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, when you first hear whatever your first narrator is in a series, that's your vision of those characters. Yeah. And then if they switch narrators or you go back to an earlier book and they started with somebody else, that doesn't sound right. But with the other perspective, if you started from the first person, it's that's also going to be their base point, and the new narrator, your narrator, is going to sound wrong. I've actually done a couple series where I replaced an earlier narrator. There was one that people didn't like the first narrator, and I jumped in with book 2, and it's been a very successful series. I've done all the books since.
Right.
But there are still reviews that come up on book 2 that people go, "Come on, that's not that character. That's not the guy. Why didn't he listen to all of the original voices and do exactly what that guy did?"
Right. Well, it's like that arrow might not be at my quiver. I might not have that available. It's, and it's everybody's take, right? Because one of the things that books do two huge things, right? They teleport us and they allow us to create pictures in our mind and hear voices in our head, and both are completely socially acceptable, right? But when you do the audiobook, you kind of take one of those out. So you really don't have much left to imagine other than like the setting and things like that. And I think I could even argue that a good audiobook can even take care of some of that, because, sometimes there'll be extra productions or sound. They'll throw some post-production stuff, which I'm kind of wishy-washy on. I still want my brain to fill in the gaps. But it's definitely, like, I can still do this in Drive. I couldn't read in Drive because, my brain would be trying to imagine too much stuff.
Yeah. And different people like different levels of production. There are some folks that adore the full cast, full basically radio drama productions with sound effects and music and chirping crickets and all sorts of stuff, multiple voices. And then there are others that don't want any character voices at all. Just read me the book, please. I don't care what sort of crazy accents you've got in your back pocket. I want you to read the book. And I fall somewhere in the middle. I want you to be able to tell who's talking just based on what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. They each need their own voice and way of talking so that you can just so that your brain can differentiate, especially when you're hitting the back and forth dialogue. I think it's huge, right? Because I need to, sometimes if somebody's doing a very flat narration, like, you kind of lose track of who's talking and things get out of whack, where you have to kind of go back up and you have to do the ping pong. Okay, this person's talking, that person's talking. So you can kind of So I think it's necessary. I fall in that boat, and I definitely enjoy your stuff. And I think I have a few sitting on my wish list waiting for my credits to pop up. So
Okay.
I'm doing the Mary Robinette series right now, The Lady Astronaut. That was really,
Okay.
I forget who, I think it was Scott King who recommended that one too. It's a really interesting kind of alternate history in the 40s from a woman's point of view. So it's really, it's a very interesting book, and I'm loving it. It's good so far. So as soon as I get done that one, we're on to some more. What should be some of the series I should look at, sir? If I want to say,
Oh boy.
yeah.
So what are we looking at? Fantasy, sci-fi, horror, nonfiction? What are you looking at?
So I tend to read. I'll tend to read things like Americans was a good example. I'll read like political thrillers and things like that. I'll also do some sci-fi, and I'll do light fantasy, like Dresden Files would be a good example, or Harry Potter fits that. It's not. Yes, it's full on fantasy, but it's grounded fantasy. Like there's the reality portion of it. Piers Anthony did things like that with the Apprentice Adept series and things like that, where it was two worlds, magical and science, and you kind of ping pong between the two. Like I enjoy that kind of.
Okay. So there's a book that I'm working on. I'm just finishing up production on right now. It's the 4th book in the Jason Crane series, but there are 3 that are out and available already. It is the last descendant of Ichabod Crane, a 17-year-old kid named Jason. And he goes to modern-day Sleepy Hollow and falls into the supernatural with the Headless Horseman and various ghosts and witches and supernatural powers and all sorts of mythological things. But it's very grounded in the history of the region, the geography of the region, and they're some of the most difficult audiobooks I've had to produce because the author is very involved in the production. So he will make notes on pacing, accent, character, everything. In fact, what I'm doing tomorrow is edits on the 4th Jason Crane book, which has been fully produced, and now the author wants to make a couple of tweaks just to make it better.
Wow.
And they're great. They're really, really well put together, well crafted. I'm very proud of them. So that might be an interesting magical fantasy, but still grounded in reality sort of book.
Now, do you find an author who's involved in the process? Because I kind of got the impression from Scott and from his 5-hour book that it's more of a, here, you're the professional, you do your thing. He kind of hands it and lets you run with it versus, this author who seems to be a little more hands-on and has a more definitive vision, right? Like he obviously sees his book beyond the written word.
Right. And he's told me that my reading of the first book has influenced his writing of the next one.
Wow.
He now hears my voice when he hears these characters. So it's unusual that there's someone that's that involved. I usually get a script and I'll record. I will ask questions. So proper names I'll often ask on, or the way a character sounds. If I'm not sure exactly, I'll ask the author. If I have that contact information, I will ask those questions.
Right.
But usually it's a phone conversation, a quick email, and then the only time the author would step in again is if there's some glaring error. I did have one book that I had to re-record entirely because there was enough proper names. It was set in Israel.
Oh.
And there were enough. This was somebody's memoir, and he had lived it. He knew these people, and while I went and researched these names and the common pronunciation of some of them, they were not his version of those names, and so I had to. And there were enough changes that it wasn't worth me doing pickups. I had to re-record the book.
Wow.
But it's better for it.
Now, do you think you learned the lesson to, I need to research this before I do it? Or was it you tried and it just wasn't available to be done?
I tried. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't do the research. It's that I didn't go directly to the source. Sometimes I think I know the answer to something. It just happened to be that this specific answer was not the one that the author wanted. But that's, again, rare. Usually I take my best stab at it, and it's mostly if I'm consistent across the series, across the book, they're usually okay with it. And so I'm given a lot of creative leeway. It's a little scary sometimes how much leeway I have in putting this product together that's then going on sale, and the financial well-being of the project is all in my hands, which is interesting.
Yeah, I can see where, a lot of authors just like the vision kind of stops, and then they're like, oh, well, we'll make an audiobook of it, and then that just kind of gets a tack on. It's not really part of the process or the consideration for a lot of authors, and then all of a sudden that helps, because more and more I'd be curious to see how much the audiobook market has grown, because given ready access to it and the affordability of it, I'd be really curious to see.
Audiobook markets, they're like double-digit increase every year. It's crazy how big this market has become. The industry is growing like crazy. The demand is growing like crazy. So yeah, absolutely. It's a great time to be in the audiobook industry.
Well, and part of that, like, I don't know, your kids are probably in the same age range for it as mine, but with kids that young, I find that audiobooks open up the possible library of titles for them so much. There's so many, like your Jason Crane series, probably. There's so many books that are in that range that are aimed at tweens that are beyond the reading level of my grade school children, but the audiobook version for them is the way to consume that. So it's off the charts how many of these books we're consuming that way.
And a lot of libraries are expanding their audiobook offerings, not only physical CDs, but they also have, if you go to your library's website, they probably have a borrowing system digitally as well. That's worth checking out.
Yeah, Overdrive, people, check it out. It's a great app. It kind of sign up for your local library, and you might have to wait, but you know what? You probably have another book you can read or listen to, or a podcast for that matter. I tend to run out of podcasts, and then I go listen to a book, and then I run out of podcasts, and there's just something comforting and enjoyable about it. It's one of the things my wife and I do when we take a road trip. See how long it is? Put it on.
Yes. My parents listen to my audiobooks when they drive down from Maine. So they have long road trips, and then I get to get an update of, well, we didn't like this book so much, but we did like this one. So it's neat that they're like my biggest fans, which is good. If they weren't, that would be a problem. But I get to hear the updates of how they liked, and then they donate those books on CD to their local library, which they live next door to, so somebody else gets to.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I'm always curious about how these things are made, and how you come about like learning this as a career and how it becomes that. And I find it fascinating. I appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun.
All right. So speaking of fun, it's about to end, because I'm going to kick it over to Dan in a few minutes after our break. And we're going to play something called a game, I think.
Oh, I've got something in mind.
Oh, you do you? All right. Well, we'll be right back after this. Hey, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the show. Real quick, I just wanted to take a moment to let you know a few things about us. Number one is we have a Pod Pledge page. Now, on there, you can donate any amount, monthly, weekly, daily, whatever, and any of that goes directly to support the show, build the sets, better equipment, and all those things. I'm not trying to get rich. I'm not trying to quit my day job. Anything helps. Number two is please check out our social media. If you're not following us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, please do so. We definitely interact with our people a lot on there because we want you guys to be part of this show. Also, be sure to subscribe to YouTube. That little red button down there? Make sure you're clicking that, and also do the bell icon so that you can get notified whenever we post a video. Once, twice, maybe 3 times a week. Lastly, please be sure to tell your friends. Whether you retweet something, whether you go out and you tell them about the channel, show them a show, anything you can do to get the word out, we would greatly appreciate it. So that's it. I'm now going to return you to your regularly scheduled program. Operators are standing by.
It's game time!
Today's game is called In a World. And the idea is that we are going to do advertisements for board games in the format of a TV spot or a movie trailer, employing some of the tropes of narration that those formats tend to do, and attempt to get one another to guess the board game we're discussing. So in turn, Chris, myself, and Eric will each present a trailer for a board game, and the other two players will attempt to guess what board game they're discussing. So you shouldn't give away things like the title, the major characters, maybe some of the key words.
I'm going to have to start writing again.
And you will score points both for successfully guessing the trailer the board game that someone is attempting to advertise for, and for having yours guessed, because that is, we are attempting to make a connection so everyone can score conceivably on a given game. Sounds good. Make sense?
Well, more or less.
Well, so let me do an example. We'll start the game off with you, Chris, but to give a flavor for what we're going to do. If I were going to say, on an ordinary morning in a Japanese city, monsters rise from the sea. Give me a report, soldier. General, they're fighting each other. There's nothing we can do. We just have to hope that they finish each other off. You guys would guess that the game I'm referring to is King of Tokyo.
Only because I just played that last night with you.
I can see that we're going to be off to a great start.
It was a heavy game night. Although I would call party foul, and you would lose a point because you didn't start with In a World.
Okay, I think that's very fair. I think it is critical that
I got to stack the deck any way I can, Eric. If you're any fans of the show, you'd know I never win my own games. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. All right. We ready to do this?
All right. Now, I don't know if I can come up with voices and individuals and soldiers and everything, but...
No, narration is the format.
All right.
So go for it. You can be the just the voiceover, just the top-down narration. So, all right, Chris.
All right.
Get us started.
In a world, moving from east to west, trains carrying goods, delivering or not. But who will build the most important route in this epic tale? That's all I got.
Was east to west a red herring here?
No,
there are lots of train games.
I didn't say anything about fish.
Should we just start naming train games?
I mean, he talked about cargo, so I don't think Ticket to Ride is on the list. I don't think it's Transamerica, because neither one of those involve cargo.
Yeah, there's no delivering of goods.
But he also is emphasizing a particular route.
I mean, is 1830 to...
I would say Age of Steam.
Ooh.
Dan?
I'm going to go with 1830.
It was actually Steam, so I'll give you Age of Steam since it's
all right.
It's its cousin, and trying to build those east-west routes. Yeah, it was a little vague. It's one of those ones you get done and you're like, oh, I went too far vague.
See, and I think I was at disadvantage. I don't think I've actually played Steam base map. Like I've played like the England map and
yeah. Steam, as I recall, is because it's going to be the east coast of the U.S. All right, who's next?
I can do it. Let me do one more before we climax here. Before we're setting a table here. So let me try to do one here. All right. Oh, I have to start with In a World now, don't I? Okay.
Yeah.
In a world where a castle needs to be built, a stern man watches. Enough of that. Now, build the walls. You, sir, have earned my favor. All right. It was brief.
It was very brief.
It's brief, but it sounded very provosty. I think that was Kalis.
Chris, have you got anything?
I was honestly going to say Kalis, too.
All right, we've got points all around as everyone successfully guesses Kalis.
All right.
Eric, what have you got for us?
All right. In a world of unlicensed medical practitioners, we don't have our license yet, but we're learning, darn it! One man has a tragic accident. What's wrong with his nose? Quick, we need to get him to the hospital, but there are no doctors! There's only one way to save him. I have an idea. We have to take out all of his bones. What? You're insane, man! All of them. Only these young people can save this man's life. This summer, you are the doctor.
Ooh. See, you did save the best for last. That's good. What do you think, Dan?
I think we're looking at the heavy Euro classic Operation.
I was thinking Dr. Panic. Because Dr. Panic is more that update, lively version. But, I mean, unlicensed.
Yeah. It was indeed lively, but I was going old school. Operation.
I was on the fence. I'm like, oh. All right. Good job. Good job. That was outstanding. Golf clap.
Raising the bar here a bit.
And the bar has been raised.
Let's go for round 2. Once more around the table.
You know what they say? The best for last and the worst go first.
Yeah. Can I go first then this round? Can we switch it up?
In a world where cars race around tracks for money, you would be hard-pressed to find a more dangerous circuit to race on. Watch these 6 cars spin and turn out of control to see who can get there first.
See, my original thought is something like Formula D.
Yeah, that's where I was.
And there is spinning out there. I don't know if that's limited to 6 cars. I'm also like Thunder. Is it Thunder Alley? That's the NASCAR style.
Yeah, but I don't know that. I don't know that one spins in Thunder Alley. I don't specifically.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Formula D as my guess.
And since this format is broken and allows me to just simply copy what Eric says, no, actually, I will go with a GMT Classic bookshelf game that also has spinning and multiple cars and say Speed Circuit that I don't think Chris has ever heard of.
Good answer.
Yes, heard of yes. I must really suck because it's actually downforce.
Oh.
So my clues I hoped were dropped were the 6 cars, the money, and Danger Circuit is literally the name of the expansion.
That was actually really on the nose. If either was owned Downforce, we probably would have seen that.
And I was thinking Downforce, but the spin-outs don't happen in Downforce.
Yeah, that was more for artistic flair because there has to be drama in the. But I mean, yeah, I was just like, what? It's funny when you get done saying these, you're like, wow, that could be 4 different games as soon as you get done saying it. All right, big old donut for this guy.
On this one, Eric was able to guess your Steam game in the first round. All right.
Yes.
All right, let's prepare myself for another one. In a world where tycoons compete, in a world of peaceful shipping along canals, the cities go by: Liverpool, Manchester, Barrow in Furness. But, sir, where are we going to get enough coal?
Strike a pose. I didn't know we had to act this out. I could have got a steering wheel.
I think I got it from the pose, actually. That's brass.
Oh, yeah, but it's old school brass. We're not talking
old school
Birmingham
brass,
or Lancashire. That's old school brass.
Yeah.
It was low fidelity brass.
Yes.
There you go. Because I am a veteran of Many Wars. So yes, I have played the original. I've actually not played either of the new editions, so I'm interested to get.
I'm new edition curious, but I have the deluxe edition of the old one, so I'm like not in a rush to replace it.
Sure.
So
sure, and one of my favorite games. So
yeah. All right.
So and really, like I think I've created the next edition of this game where all it is attempting to do poses, and
that's the fourth round.
Yes, the tiebreaker, the lightning round. Strike a pose.
Yes.
Yeah, it's basically it plays
Time's
just
up
like
rules.
monikers. We're just gonna rip off, the old times up monikers, name games in a hat, but everything you say has to start with in a world.
Okay. Okay. See, we're ready to go to Kickstarter. Come on, let's get this. Get this
I
up
had
before
$1,
someone steals this brilliant idea. This is a moneymaker. All right. All right, Eric, why don't you close us off?
All right. Let's see. Here we go. In a world of magic, something's wrong with my father, and I need to know what. Heroes are transformed. What's happening to us? Heroes must learn to be bigger than they are. How are we going to get way up there? Shh, it's the cat. Heroes must learn to rise above. We have to find out what's wrong with my father. Heroes must find cheese. This summer, be the smallest hero with the biggest heart.
Well, I think when they relaunch this one, they better use that in the Kickstarter video. I was roundabout asking, do you have an answer?
Yes, I believe we were talking about Mice and Mystics.
Absolutely we are.
Yeah, we are. Of course we are.
Beautiful.
Fabulous. Well, in surprising no one, I have that Eric won.
Yeah, I tallied the results, and with 5 points in this game, and with the exception of that downforce incident, an otherwise clean record, Eric has emerged triumphant from our game of In a World.
In a World. Outstanding. Well, that was a lot of fun, Eric. I appreciate you playing along.
I had a blast. Thanks for having me.
It was good. You're a good sport. I enjoyed that. So where can people find you on the internet if they'd like to follow what you do and see what you're doing next?
Well, if you want to follow my board game stuff, that's at dicetower.com. We have a weekly podcast that I'm a part of. There's also Dice Tower Tonight on the YouTubes, which we do every other week. It's a live simulcast where you can answer questions or ask questions of Tom, Crystal Pisano, and me. If you want to look at my audiobook stuff, ericsummerer.com, or just go to audible.com and search for Eric Michael Summerer, and you'll get a whole bunch of stuff. Just, uncheck the romance box. You might not want it.
Yeah, we definitely didn't go down that road because, hey, man's got to pay bills, right?
Yep.
Never fault him for that. If I ever have a romance author on, well, I can't because they're way too busy. Like, I learned that from the 5-hour novel. They are ridiculously busy because of the amount of books that they put out.
Yeah, and it shows, just so you know. Grammar is not their strong suit. I've read more romance novels than I necessarily thought I would at this point in my life. And, grammar, not the important part of that genre.
Good to know. And also, I would point out, not an important part of our show. But that's an argument for another day. Well, thank you, sir, for being on. Thanks, Dan, for putting on that great game. And thank you at home for watching. And be sure the next time you're reading something, put on the audiobook when you game all night. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed our efforts at comedy and fun, please support us on Podpledge. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, don't forget to engage with us on Board Game Geek Guild 3134. You can also check us out on our website, GameAllNightShow.com. And this show has been made possible through supporters like these. Game All Night is proud to be sponsored by Game Toppers. Check them out at GameToppersLLC.com. Upgrading your gaming experience. Angry Octopus. Apparently, you're supposed to research before somebody comes. Yeah, pro tip for those of you who want to interview somebody. All right.
Don't mess with him like that. I am still in the room. We can confirm. I have not fallen asleep over here.
Okay. Well, if you fall asleep, I'll hear a thud. Man, there's got to be something in here. Like, there's got to be something for Stargate fans that Ronan came back to Atlantis. Come on.
So
In a world where money is king.
If in a world, actually, that could be the name of the game. In a world. That's
In a
it.
World is a fine title for this game. This can be your post-credit outtakes. You can show the feverish writing down on our notes.
Scribble.
Segment.
No, I tend to like those to be a little more boisterous and funny, vampy.
But
I would
as long
argue
as
that
failure is some degree of interesting, then my game segment is where you want to be.